Hello. Sorry for being late, everybody. Yeah, I don't know if it was like this for anybody else, but when I tried joining it, there was another meeting already in progress. It's like, that's weird, because this is the meeting that's supposed to be in progress. And I think somebody clicked the European burn down meeting link because that's scheduled for a separate day at a separate time. And Zoom doesn't let the same account have multiple scheduled meetings going on concurrently. And because I have to do this wonderful thing where I allow everybody to join before the host joins, apparently even though Zoom meetings are scheduled for a certain time and date, you can click that link whenever you want and start that meeting whenever you want. Yay, moderation. How's everybody doing this Monday? Okay, let me do the usual spiel, and while I'm doing the usual spiel, I will paste a link to the meeting notes in the chat so you all can fill your name in the attendees list. Hi, everybody. I am Aaron of SigBeard. Today is Monday, March the 4th. This is the Kubernetes 1.14 release team weekly meeting. This week is week 9. We're all being publicly recorded, witnessing and talking about week 9 as we adhere to the CNCF code, or sorry, the Kubernetes code of conduct, which boils down to please don't be a jerk. So as usual, I would like to try and have everybody else go before me so that I don't end up monologuing. I will say up at the top that I do appreciate everybody helping out with memes to remind everybody that it's code freeze. I'm slowly building up my tweet thread of memes to remind everybody that code freeze is coming March 7th. I'm also just kind of mildly freaked out at the CI signal that our release seems to have right now. So I'm interested in having a more in-depth discussion about what we're going to do about that today. So with all that said, I will hand off to Claire to talk to us this week about this week's adventures in enhancements.
Sure. So I said for the current status of 1.14 enhancements, it's feeling yellowish green to me right now. Leaning on the yellow side because we still have 11 issues that are marked at risk, mostly because we're waiting for test plan PRs to get merged. And like there are just a lot of open PRs and realizing that code freeze is on Friday, but green because people are responsive on GitHub and Slack, it seems like, at least when we do ping them for updates. So that's been good. And we do still have a week before all those open PRs need to be merged. So not terribly concerned quite yet. No changes in terms of number of enhancements since last Friday. We're still at 33. No deferrals or anything added. So yeah, let me know if there are any questions.
So there's 3 enhancements you brought to our attention last week. Can we walk through those real quick and see what progress has been made on those?
Sure. I'll pull the links back up to the meeting notes so folks can see them. So we have 783. This one, I think, we're, sorry, catching up on the comments from like this morning. It sounds like we're still waiting on maybe a couple of PRs to actually get merged. And it looks like, Aaron, you'd asked a couple of questions in the past half hour, 40 minutes or so.
Yeah, I pinged in Slack and I got a lot of feedback. And so I'll just throw my opinion out there, but I'm curious. I really would prefer other people's opinions over mine. I get a lot of feedback that this is like, oh, we're just shuffling code around. It's just a refactor. It's not user facing. Nobody should care about it. Like, it's not worth blogging about. It's not worth bragging about. It's not worth highlighting as a theme. Okay, cool. I get that. It seems like it's maybe too early to try and cluster it in with the theme of extensibility and stability. But there's a lot of code related to it that does involve moving things from place A to place B, and sometimes that can break stuff. Should we as a release team be tracking these sorts of things? Or should we as a release team say, oh, don't worry, we trust you. We'll say that this isn't actually a thing that's landing in 114, and you are allowed to go ahead and write whatever PRs you'd like, but we're not going to accept any more PRs once code freeze happens. Like, what feels like the right path forward for people here?
Well, I mean, there's always, sorry, go ahead, Nicholas. There's always a certain number of changes that are going on that aren't related to a specific release. Right, so is there any difference in this case? It's just going to happen organically and we don't need to track it here?
I think one of the things we'd want to see as an ideal for the release team is the rate of change that it's not targeting the release under that we're currently trying to get out the door drop eventually to 0. That really should have happened earlier, because we want really everyone who's submitting code should be working on something related to getting the release out. Or targeting a feature branch, in which case we don't need to interact with it at all. So for those people who are more or less, I guess, it would be, I guess the nicest way you can say it, pre-factoring work. I think there is still the same level of scrutiny you would expect for anyone shipping any changes to the release stabilization branch, because it impacts our ability to stabilize the branch. So I think we do need to have some scrutiny over the changes going in writ large. It would be nice if we could do more gating today, but you know, that's not something we can do automatically.
Right.
So maybe that's just a little bit of riffing. Sorry, Aaron.
So what I had liked about this CAP is that it talked about a very phased approach to implementing things, and then it even called out what the objectives were for the 114 timeframe. But then it appears as though the state of today is that that objective is only going to be partially complete. And so in that partially complete state, it doesn't even really make sense to call it alpha. And so maybe a thing for us to think about going forward is whether we should have pushed to scope this down to something that was worth calling landed in 114, or whether we should have rejected this outright because it didn't seem like it was going to be feasible to accomplish in a single release cycle. To try to, I think as Caleb was saying, like aspire to turn this into discrete chunks of functionality that can land within a single release cycle. Okay, so my suggestion, unless anybody like disagrees, is I'm going to kick this enhancement out of the milestone, and we can start using like potentially as we come up to code freeze, we could start being like, hey, is this PR actually related to an enhancement? Could you link us to the enhancement? Could you link us to the CAP that this PR is definitely like helping fix? Because if we can't see those, that doesn't sound like good justification for trying to land after code freeze. Okay. So the next one I think has to do with huge pages. Is that right?
Yes. 751 is huge pages.
Any movement or progress on that? What's the risk there?
No progress that I've heard of, and it looks like they, based on like the comment from Ntalla, it doesn't look like they got a docs PR in, and I know that the docs PR date was on Friday, so I would be inclined if they missed that docs PR date to bump them off as well.
Okay. So this is a case where it appears as though a single code change went in, and all the code change did was remove a feature gate to enable this feature. So either we need to go revert that PR to gate this again, or we need to figure out like how we can motivate SigNode to prove to us that this feature is being exercised in release blocking tests, and that there really truly is no need for docs, or it's already been documented, that sort of thing. So Claire, could you or your team reach out to SigNode directly on that one?
Yep, sounds good.
Specifically, probably Derek Carr. I think that's his team is implementing the huge page support, and he's the chair of SigNode.
Cool. I will go into their Slack channel and ping on that issue. And then
Okay. What was the last one?
127. And so this is another one from SigNode. This one I also think is probably likely going to get bumped because the test or the document that they'd been referring to as their sort of community proposal isn't really in line with the CUP, and we can't seem to be getting a lot of updates on them on where, like, if they're converting anything to a CUP or if they have test plans elsewhere. But I can also just ping while I'm pinging SigNode on huge pages, I can ping them on this one as well.
Okay. I also feel like, given that there is this outstanding doc, that I want to shut this down now rather than attempting to let it sneak in prior to code freeze. And so what I would ask from my issue triage and bug triage team is to put holds on PRs that are related to this. Stephen, I saw you unmuted. Did you have a suggestion here?
Outside of shutting it down, totally agreeing there. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It's also an issue that's been open since like 2016. So.
No, Cat says no.
Hey, Aaron, do you mind repeating that so I can take a note for the bug triage team?
Yeah, so I think I'd like for Claire to, or I can do it, but since I'm talking, I want to empower Claire here. Claire, I think you should make the call that 127 is getting kicked out of the milestone, and then I think the issue triage team should make sure that any PRs related to this milestone are held with a link back to the comment that says, we're not accepting this because of these reasons. I think there's sufficient comment trail on this enhancement issue to describe how we have asked for things and we have not received the things.
All right, I made a note of that.
Thanks.
Well, I will ping SigNode and let them know that if there's not something within like maybe 24 hours, it's out.
Okay. Are there any other notable enhancements we should be looking at between now and Wednesday? Okay, cool.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, I don't think so, but Wednesday I'll probably start calling out any that have open PRs that do not look like they're close to being completed.
Okay. I would rather have that list soon so we can start kicking things out soon. I feel like trying to kick things out a day right before code freeze might be a little uncomfortable for people. And I am of the opinion that at the start of the work week is a much better time to give folks a heads up that we are moving on some things.
Okay. Then I will work on getting it sooner than Wednesday for the folks who would need to work on getting things kicked out.
Thank you, Claire. Maria, I think, are you here to talk to us about CI Signal?
I am indeed. Hello. Okay, so a couple of things happening. So I've put a yellow there. My thought process is that there are a couple of consistently failing tests in blogging suites, which makes me lean away from green. But the vast majority of them are not long running, so they've occurred since the weekend. And the one that has been open for days has a PR open to solve it. So in terms of consistently failing stuff, we're in relatively good shape. The thing that is a bit more worrying is that there is a significant percentage of runs that are flaky. So while technically they've passed at least once for commits that we care about that have been ported onto 1.14, they are flaking some of them the majority of the time. So in terms of just numbers in failures in blocking suites, we've got 0 at the moment in master blocking, 3 in master upgrade, 1 has an open PR. One of the issues has an open PR to fix it, and the other couple of issues started during the weekend. And we've got 1 failing job in 1.14 blocking, but it seems like a flake, which is not much better, but seems at least like an indication of that it's not a bug. You mentioned before that you are freaking out quite heavily. I am a little bit too, not heavily just yet. It's mostly the amount, like the hint at instability that comes with a high percentage of flakes. And that's going to be, I don't want to say the top priority, but the joint top priority over this week, together with any new, obviously, like failing tests. The action plan that I had in mind there is to try and address a little bit the tragedy of the commons that comes with failing jobs. Like a lot of the time, especially with flakes, things will flake, but because of 2 different tests that belong to different SIGs and whatnot, so it can be quite tricky to get folks to action them. So I was hoping to go back to jobs that are flaking, separate the actual tests out in separate issues, and then go around the SIGs and ask for help in triaging them and addressing them. How does that all sound, and is there anything else that's scary at the moment?
I keep waiting for other people to have opinions other than me. Like, I feel like I do you all a disservice by having a consistent, fully formed, well-structured opinion. So here's why I'm freaked out, by the way. So for those of you who haven't participated in a release before, as we get down to burn down and we start really trying to iron out those last remaining critical bugs, we're trying to, we'd really like for all of our tests to be passing. Like, I don't know if this is the case today, but it used to be that our tool actually wouldn't allow us to cut a release unless it could find a single commit that actually like had green for all of the jobs in release blocking. And one of the things that we use, okay, it does. So one of the things we use to try and gain confidence that the release is stable is that the same commit is capable of passing 3 times in a row. And if you take a look at the sig-release master blocking dashboard, the job that has me freaked out is the one that's called GCE cause master default here. I'll link it in chat. And there's also a 1.14 version of this job. And let's see if I can find it. So I'll leave it as an exercise to the viewer to see how many times they can find that job has successfully passed 3 times in a row. But to my eyes, there really haven't been that many instances of that in the past 2 weeks, which is about as far back as the test grid history goes. And I suspect if I invested the time in digging up longer reaching metrics out of BigQuery and tried to turn that into a graph, it maybe wouldn't look a whole lot prettier. This is really concerning to me because as of right now, I feel like we're not going to be able to cut a release. So why is this happening so much? If I look at both of those boards, I feel like I actually can't point to any, excuse me, any one single test, to use Maria's tragedy of the commons thing. But if I look at the prefixes on those test names, these boards sort things in order of flakiness. You could also sort in order of failures. They all seem to be sig storage or sig off. So my suggestion would be that we literally get somebody from each of those SIGs to show up at the next burn down meeting, and that you reach out to those SIGs directly and let them know that this is really a problem and it's really blocking the release. because I'm not sure if this is a question of, do we need to kick some of these tests out? Are they just poorly written tests? Is there some larger systemic issue that is causing like over 30 different test cases, just at a glance here, to all flake in one way or another? Could we use our triage dashboard to, that's, go.kates.io triage, could we use that to maybe figure out if like all of these are failing with the same failure mode? Maybe there's some kind of consistent timeout failure, or are they all failing for different reasons? I don't know, Maria, maybe like you have some insight into that information, but until I get that kind of information, I'm concerned about where we're at, and I'm concerned about how we're going to get to green.
Well, I guess I would suggest, as much as I hate ad hoc process, if there are challenges in SIG storage, that is a SIG that is both with SIG storage and SIG off, there are opportunities to pull more people, more eyes on this, at least from the Google side, because we staff those places pretty heavily. If, Maria, you have some, like a procedure that, say, an engineering manager could direct himself or herself or their team to use to help triage this as kind of a fire drill exercise, that would be really helpful, so that people aren't, hitting you or Aaron for how do I even get a hold of whether things are good or not. That could also help burn down these issues and give us some more confidence as we approach the end of the release. I hate it, but SOD has always been super responsive about this kind of issues in the past.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm advocating for escalating to the SIG directly, because I think I'm looking for some acknowledgement from the SIG that they're aware of this broader issue. SOD and Michelle are both amazing, super productive people. That SIG is amazingly productive. They helped unblock us with diff resources, but now that we've noticed that their tests aren't leaking volumes everywhere, it's become really clear just how much the rest of the flakes are affecting us. I also see there's a SIG network test that seems to be really blocking one of the upgrade tests that I don't see in your report right now, so I'll follow up with you offline on that.
Sounds good. So next things for me are to reach out to SIG storage and other SIGs, at least the ones with the top flaky tests, let's say, and take it from there.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm just trying to focus on one thing right now, I'm focused on that one job. There are probably a couple others, but like that one job is super red. And the way the board looks right now, SIG storage's name pops up a lot, and so does SIG off. So those are the two that I would start with.
Yep, makes sense.
Okay, bug triage. Nico, are you here to talk to us about bug triage? Is somebody from Nico's team here to talk to us? Nick.
Yeah, hey, I'm here. Most, if not all, of the issues that we've identified in the bug triage tracking spreadsheet have been labeled with, 114 milestone and have been pinged by Nico and yourself, amusingly. And so I'm going to spend some time this week and try and rally the troops to re-ping these issues. They need another update. There hasn't been much of an update since the pinging, at which point then we need to decide whether or not these issues are going to get into 114 at all. So.
Okay. So the other thing that I feel as though your team can be very helpful with as we go up to code freeze, because we have decided that just the milestone is sufficient for whether or not we're going to allow something to merge after code freeze. I think it's important that we pay attention to whether or not the milestone is on PRs that are really worth landing right now. Like, there are almost as many open PRs that have the V114 milestone as there are issues. And it's really unclear to me whether or not all of those PRs should have the milestone attached to them through the lens of, these are PRs that are going to help complete an enhancement that has been driven through Claire's excellent shepherding and is well documented through a KEP, or whether these are just kind of unrelated, nice to have things, or whether somebody has decided they really liked my Austin Powers GIF and want to live dangerously and attempt to land a size XXL refactor a few days before code freeze. These are the sorts of things that sadly do require humans to interpret the PRs. And while I generally love my community and trust them a whole bunch, I also kind of trust the people who show up at this meeting and are focused on shipping the release a little bit more. So anything that the issue triage team can do to help out with PRs as well would be really appreciated.
All right, I made a note of that, and I'll relay that back to the team.
Thanks. Okay. Amit, how is test info going?
Good. From the test info side, it looks pretty good. We merged 158 PRs last week, which looks like it's on the standard trajectory. After fixing the Go wait failures on Friday, we have successfully built on Go 112, and Aaron, you sent out an email to KDev regarding that. Regarding Prow Health, it looks pretty good, apart from one-off issues that I'm looking into, where it's failing to honor the periodic job constraint, but I'm looking into those. And then, of course, the next upcoming milestone is code freeze, which I believe no one's been mentioning a lot. And that's it.
So I am personally of the opinion that it is really, really, really important that we get a green run of the scale performance job. Or if somebody can point me to a green run of that job since we migrated to Go 112, because that was sort of the last sentence in the email that I sent out to Kubernetes dev about migrating to this. As we've discussed in meetings in the past, SIG scalability has the ability to reject large changes that impact the performance of Kubernetes and prevent it from meeting the two SLOs they are accountable for, which have to do with like pod latency and scheduling throughput. So if migrating to Golang 112 did in fact break that, it would be really helpful to find that out now, as opposed to during code freeze. So it sounds like they're having trouble getting appropriate resources to test that out, because the 5,000 node job seems to be scheduled a lot or something, or more frequently than they're expecting.
Yeah, it's definitely a scheduling issue, and I don't think it's related to Go 112. But once that fixes, we'll hopefully see a green run.
Okay. Like I see a couple of green runs of the master scale performance job over the weekend. March 1st, March 2nd, those are green. That's super cool. But the scale correctness job, I don't see any green since February 27th, which means I haven't seen a successful run of that job with Golang 112. So hopefully we can get that happening before code freeze.
To clarify one thing there, Feb 27 was before that merged, right? So it's not saying that we have a possible issue with Golang 112 yet. We just have no data, or?
Yes, I'm not making a judgment call. I'm just saying I don't have any data. That's all. Given the way that the release master blocking thing, I don't know what I can't see right now. So.
Yep, just wanted to make sure that's what you're saying.
Other point of interest there is I put some time on tomorrow's SIG testing meeting to discuss what, if any, test info related changes that SIG should defer until after 115. Generally, SIG testing does not itself abide by the code freeze process because a lot of testing for code has nothing to do with Kubernetes, or none of it lands inside of Kubernetes. But that SIG is very sensitive to the fact that we probably shouldn't deploy any high-risk changes that suddenly change the performance characteristics of our test infrastructure or change contributor workflow while we're in code freeze. So if anybody has any opinions or is interested in discussing that, SIG testing meeting tomorrow at 1:30, and you are welcome to add whatever items on the agenda you would like as well. If you can't make the meeting, and we'll make sure that we discuss those. Okay, Jim, I'm so curious. Let's hear about the effectiveness of the Bring Out Your Docs meme.
Hey, thanks. Unfortunately, I've been out of pocket for most of the weekend, so I'm still doing a little bit of catch-up work myself. So from a high level, I'd say about 75 docs are in flight, whether that's with an open PR or otherwise in motion docs. But there's still a 25% of needed documentation, from what I can tell. What we're missing there, and why I say we're yellowish green, I'm stealing Claire's line here. The yellowish is my fault for just not keeping up and keeping as close of a metric on our documentation that we're missing. So we'll have a deliverable end of day today to know exactly what we're missing and what we need to do as far as any of the problem ones like Claire was mentioning earlier. We have one that already has some issues in addition to missing the docs PR. So I want to get that hammered out to end of day today, and we'll have a further update for the next burn down meeting.
Okay. Any questions for Jim?
I don't know if this is a question for Jim or if it's just kind of, I don't know like the normal process around docs, but if enhancements miss the docs freeze, do they, like, is it normal for us to bump them off the release because they missed that? Or do we kind of say, get these in by like this particular extension? Do we make them submit exceptions?
So what I've heard in the past, and anyone else who's been around a lot longer than I have, please chime in, is that it's more of a forcing function that we have the docs present, and usually it's an early indicator that we're going to have problems with that enhancement or that kept coming in. So I think it's more of a raise the alarm when they miss that deadline than it is like let's immediately bump them. Some do result in a decision by the release team to bump them off the release due to missing docs, but usually there's additional issues with that release in general when we start seeing this happen.
Cool. Sounds good. So then I guess maybe like another action is once you have the list of who missed, I can update their status to at risk, since that sounds like that's the appropriate next step.
Yep. Yeah, and I'd say expect to see that in the next couple hours here before end of day today.
Awesome, thanks. That sounds like what I have seen in releases past as well. And I will certainly hold that into my evaluation of these enhancements' health. Dave, are you here to talk to us about release notes?
Yep. So latest PR is in with the latest release notes. What we're kind of working on this week is really updating external dependency, known issues, doing some editing on the release notes, and also kind of discussing external dependencies going forward. I know Jeff had a few ideas around that, but that'd be something kind of more of a looking forward thing.
Okay. So I guess help me understand, we talked a little bit last week about kind of wanting to give release notes more of an editorial voice and the authority to try and make things a little more user-facing. Do we have any concrete plans for what we're going to do there? Or am I hearing we're just going to, like, the draft is what the release notes are going to look like?
No, that's kind of what we'll be working through this week, is kind of finalizing what that will look like. I think we've got consensus on what that will look like. So some of the things we discussed and kind of decided on was around major themes not really being part of the release notes. Just for the fact if we look at major themes, from previous release notes, and I think you mentioned this too, they kind of just look like a SIG update rather than actual, changes to core Kubernetes. The other thing that we need to meet on this week is really just kind of what that changelog looks like. Because right now, still, if you kind of go in there and look at it, it's really just what's ever generated and needs more of a editorial theme to it rather than what's generated from the release notes tool.
Okay. Perhaps this will be more useful to discuss in the context of comms. I think we have a more significant discussion about comms on Wednesday. But in the meantime, Kaitlyn, are you here to discuss comms? Is Natasha here? George? Okay, I thought somebody was.
Sorry. I realized that my Zoom was muted. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. So we are working this week to get all of the features filled out in the blog post and media messaging doc between code freeze and the March 12th deadline. So that's kind of where we're at, still on track, and then we'll get everything into review next week.
Okay. I think we had talked on the burn down meeting on Friday about maybe just kind of checking in on that doc on Wednesday. That would be a useful forcing function just to make sure that doc is actually getting populated. And it would also be useful information for this group to know as we look especially hard at what's trying to land right before code freeze or not. If things do seem to be lining up with that doc, we probably really want to make sure they land. If they don't seem to be lining up with that doc, that's maybe another piece of signal that we should edge them away from the code freeze cliff.
Yep, I'll make a note of that as well.
Okay. I feel like that was something maybe George had volunteered for, but I'm not clear. Okay.
Yeah, I'll ping the group to make sure we're aligned.
Cool. Hannes, you want to talk to us about branch management?
Yep, sure. Well, not too much news. I'm doing the daily fast forwards. The next cut will be someone next week for the beta 2. Other than that, I'm working on a small PR notifying the publishing bot people when we cut the new branch, so that we don't miss that in future, hopefully. And also, I'm checking a bit on the caps. There is some movement right now on the caps regarding packaging. There is some movement right now. I think there was a cap merged, but or maybe the wrong one. I'm not sure yet. I will follow up on that after the meeting, and I will check with you, Stephen, and probably with all the other folks involved on that. But it's all the caps are meant for 1.15 anyway, so it's nothing that would like block or whatever this release. Any questions?
I don't think I have any at the moment. Okay, so in sum, I do not ascribe to the philosophy that chartreuse is an acceptable stoplight color. So my color is yellow, and it's probably going to be red if I don't see substantial improvement on, or at least a plan on what we're going to be doing with our CI signal. I just like, I'm really because there are just so many flakes and I can't point to any one single source of failure. I'm really hoping we can figure out what we're going to do about that. So I will continue to meme all the memes for code freeze And as reminders of burn down meetings, why not? That seems to get you people to show up. The other thing I wanted to discuss is that it's time for us to think about the V115 release team. That's part of why I specifically invited Tim and Steven to join, although, hey, whatever, they're sig-release chairs. Maybe they're super interested in everything the release team does. But the docs as linked in the meeting notes, and I'll just paste them in chat for your benefit as well, say that we should be doing release team selection when code freeze hits, which is Thursday, which feels like it's really way too soon to me personally. Also, we don't actually have a release team meeting on Thursday yet. We don't start the real fun of daily burn down meetings until next week. So my proposal was that we consider whether or not, those of you who have been shadows, whether or not you'd like to try some other role, either the role you've been shadowing for or something else, that we all kind of think about that. And then we do that on this time next week. The reason I'm suggesting that is I'm cognizant of the fact that we have a number of European time zone folks here. So I would really like to make sure that we meet at a time that is good for you. Release team selection has in the past also happened at the SIG release meeting, which happens at Tuesdays at 1 p.m. I don't feel like that's a really acceptable time for European time zones. So I just wanted to throw that out. The other caveat is I'm going to be on a plane during, I might be on a runway during that time. So I may not actually be here for that, for at least like the first half of the Monday release team meeting next week. So if that's the case, I can speak to who I would want to nominate and have that happen without me. But I just wanted to throw it to the audience, and I guess ask Tim and Steven if they have more color they would like to add, just because I'm approaching this from this perspective of I am about to go heads down on the 114 release, and I really need other people to take ownership of the next release, because that's not my problem, this one is.
All right, so comments there. I would say the first thing I'd want everyone to do is to check out the document that that Aaron wrote. That Aaron linked in the notes around release team selection. Note that that is a living document. So if you feel like there are things that are inaccurate about it, we should change it. The general thought about the selection starting at the beginning of code freeze is more of a guideline than it is a rule. So if you as a team feel you need to shift it, I feel like code freeze gives you enough time to get started on that. But honestly, sorry if that notification came through on my mic. From the release team leads perspective, this is a good time to consider who is going to succeed you. Once you decide who is going to succeed you, they can go and run with the release team selection itself. Release team role leads, all of you should be considering who you think should be succeeding you, who have been performing really great during the release cycle. And the lead should feel free to discuss that either on the mailing list or privately, just to get the ball rolling on this. This is not a hard deadline. This is just let's start chatting about it. The second part of it is the survey, right? So once we select the leads, and we have to start looking at shadows for those leads. So this cycle, we decided to kick out a survey. The survey got lots of responses, and almost overwhelming amount of responses for everyone who was involved in one, parsing the raw data, and then also reaching out individually to each of the prospective shadows. So I would like everyone to assess that process. Like, do you feel it was good? Could it be better? Could the survey questions be more finely tuned? There is an issue for that I will link, and I think I'll stop talking now. Yeah.
The only thing that I would add is if you're loving your role and loving the release team, you're not obligated to step aside also. So it is nice to have some continuity. So no absolute pressure to step away from things.
So just a note as a former release team member, like one of the things that I loved being able to do was, one, be in the role and be able to figure out, now that I have this amount of access, or now that I've touched these things, what can I improve on outside of the release team? And I've used that as an opportunity to work more deeply in sig-release and more deeply on the sig PM side, coming from features or enhancements that it's now called. So also consider that there are places you don't, while Tim is right that it's nice to have some continuity, it's also an opportunity to step outside of the release team and move into release engineering or licensing, or how do I handle package release process, like things like that, right? So start to consider that as well. And if you feel you want to talk to any of us, definitely feel free to reach out on Slack about that. So.
Also, since Stephen was talking about just like what we could do better, it reminded me, did you know we have a retrospective document where, like, if there's something that's really annoying you right now or something that's working really well for you right now, it's way better to like write it now in the heat of the moment, because you'll forget like a week from now, guarantee it. And it'll be a useful thing for us to have as we walk through the retrospective of this release at the end of this release cycle. Something else to keep in mind is that historically, it can take a little bit to draft like the schedule for the next release. So there's generally about like a week of lull time in between releases. I have personally found participating in the release team to be an incredibly rewarding experience that has allowed me to see so much of the project. And yeah, all right, I know, like I'm on the steering committee and whatnot, but seriously, like this is where the work actually happens, and you get to see how code really lands in Kubernetes and how we really ensure the quality of Kubernetes. It's awesome. I highly recommend it. Okay, so I'm not hearing any no's for running through this process verbally here at this meeting next Monday. Cool. So my proposal is I'm going to try and time box our usual Monday meeting to a burn down, so just 30 minutes, and then we will take the latter 30 minutes to run through release team selection. In an effort to be as friendly as possible to those of us who can't regularly attend this meeting, you are totally free to start this discussion on asynchronous mediums such as email and Slack, and make sure that that information finds its way here.
So, Aaron, given that you may be unavailable, if you would like to actually start that process and nominate your people first, just to get the ball rolling, that'd be cool.
I will, just as soon as they stop freaking out that I suggested that maybe they step up. So I don't know about the rest of you, but it appears any time I've asked anybody about doing something with the release, it kind of freaks them out, and they really need to have a good long think about it. That's sort of the other reason that I think it would be good for us to spend the next week thinking about this. So if I can get some commitment and decisions before then, I will definitely start that process. If I can't, I can't. Hey, since I mentioned the European time zone thing, by the way, I've been watching the European release team meetings that we set up on Tuesday at a time that's supposed to be more friendly for European contributors. And they don't seem terribly well attended. Now, maybe I'm speaking to the wrong group of people because this isn't the European team meeting. But I'm just throwing out there, like, when we kick up to daily burn down meetings, I'm happy to say that that European time is like the burn down meeting. And we could also consider having the Thursday burn down meeting also being at European time. It gives us 3 like Pacific centric times to European centric times. It also means that like I don't have to simultaneously attend a burn down meeting and have somebody else give a release update at the community meeting on Thursday.
Yeah, so I think in a previous release, we staggered the time. So like Monday, Wednesday, Friday was the standard time, and then the Tuesday, Thursday was like a more European friendly time for burn downs.
So consider that. I'll throw that out on asynchronous mediums so we can chat about that, Mike. I think that means you're on the hook for at least one more of these release team meetings tomorrow, and we'll ask that idea there as well.
That's cool. I'll channel my inner sick beard.
Okay, any questions? Okay, I'm going to go spend my remaining 6 minutes hugging my Nope cat. I hope you all find something fun to do with your 6 minutes. Happy Monday.
Later, y'all.